Hi, I'm Greg Krasovsky. I'm an American-Russian attorney of Ukrainian descent. This video is dedicated to victims of war crimes in the current Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Since the start of the Russian special military operation to defend the residents of Donbass and demilitarize and denazify Ukraine on February 24th, there have been numerous allegations made regarding war crimes. Unfortunately, war crimes from both sides of the conflict. Ukrainian government officials, military officials, Ukrainian residents have made allegations that Russian forces have committed war crimes. Same thing with the Russian government, the government of Donetsk, Lugansk, People's Republics, and their residents. They have also made allegations that Ukrainian armed forces and paramilitaries have committed war crimes. My approach is straightforward. I consider myself a Ukrainian. I am saddened by what's happening, and my job is to make sure that anyone who commits war crimes against Ukrainian residents, Russian residents, residents of the self-proclaimed Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, is brought to justice. War crimes have no place. So my appeal is to basically two categories of viewers. If you or someone else you know has become a victim of a war crime, or you know of a war crime, please feel free to contact my law offices. And along with my colleagues, with lawyers that I work with in Ukraine and in Russia, we will try to provide you adequate legal representation and get justice. Getting justice means having those who've committed war crimes identified and prosecuted to the full extent permitted by law, and getting compensation for victims of war crimes, for their economic losses, for their pain and suffering. In the fog of war, many different things can happen. When we're talking about war crimes, we're talking about combatants intentionally committing acts that have been traditionally defined as war crimes and crimes against humanity. So if without justification you are shelling, shooting, bombing, detaining, beating, torturing, raping, killing civilians, you're a war criminal. No ifs, then, or buts about it. You deserve to be prosecuted. Before that, you deserve to be removed from the battlefield. If you're a commanding officer who has allowed troops under your command to commit war crimes, you deserve to be prosecuted and punished, stripped of rank, removed from a position of authority, things like that. These are obvious things. But we have to keep certain things in mind. By the way, also, if before we get to the certain things in mind, if you're a combatant, and remember, a normal soldier's job is to protect his country's population, right, from the enemy. You're supposed to protect your people, right? You don't protect your people by using them as human shields. If you know the enemy's coming to whatever residential area that's within your area of defense, area of military activity, what are you supposed to do? First thing you're supposed to do is to ensure evacuation of residents, okay? Regardless of whether they're going to evacuate, in your own territory. The other thing we've seen in Ukraine is Ukrainian soldiers, plus National Guards people or territorial defense units have refused to let residents evacuate to areas under Russian control because Russian troops are the enemy. Well, so far, based on eyewitness accounts and information that I know, Ukrainian refugees who have fled to areas controlled by Russian forces or LDPR forces have received humane, fair treatment. So if the only, for instance, exit corridor or evacuation corridor for the residents in your area is toward Russian controlled areas, and you refuse to do that, then you're needlessly subjecting the civilian population that you're supposed to protect to danger. Obviously, if your preference is to let people evacuate to areas of Ukraine controlled by Ukrainian forces, that's fine. And if civilians refuse to evacuate to those areas, then already that's on them. Then they're subjecting themselves to risk. Civilians should never be used as human shields. Numerous reports I've seen, eyewitness accounts and phone calls from people on the ground, where Ukrainian defenders have set up next to residential buildings, have set up military equipment, armored personnel carriers, artillery, surface-to-surface missile units, have set up sniper nests within apartment buildings, mortar positions on roofs of apartment buildings, while the residents were herded into basements. This is insane. This is a war crime. You don't do that, okay? If you've decided to turn a residential area into a battlefield, you need to keep two things in mind. Number one, you're going to leave people homeless. Who's going to rebuild all this? Your job is to protect your population and your country. And if you can't protect it, well, then you have to just withdraw, right? If you've decided to take on this policy that you're going to turn, every residential area you're into Stalingrad or Aleppo look what happened in Mariupol, then that's on you. And unfortunately, we're seeing it in areas where the Ukrainian army has been pushed out of, especially in the Donbass region, where I have seen footage, eyewitness footage, amateur footage from local residents, where trenches have been dug among residential buildings. People's houses have been turned into headquarters for the Ukrainian armed forces, machine gun nests, sniper nests. And then what happens afterwards? Once you fire from a residential building, the return fire is going to go into those residential areas and destroy it. Plus, we've also seen reports where once the Ukrainian forces have withdrawn from particular areas, residential areas, they've shelled them. I guess either to shell the Russian or the LDPR forces that have entered them, or just to shell them out of spite. And I really hope that's not the case. My approach is, if you're Ukrainian, we're all Ukrainians, regardless of whether in Lugansk and Donbass or Donetsk or Lviv or Ivano-Frankivsk or Vinnytsia or Kiev. All Ukrainians deserve to be treated with the equal amount of respect and dignity that all human beings deserve to be treated. And if you've decided to be a soldier and defend the residents of Ukraine from what you perceive to be a foreign military threat, then do so with honor. But keep people safe. Let people evacuate. Don't leave them in areas that are going to become battlefields. Don't ever use them as human shields. And don't needlessly destroy civilian and residential infrastructure by setting up your defensive positions there, because return fire will destroy those locations. And then what's the point? Who's going to rebuild our Ukraine? Second point, regarding war crimes. Obviously, we don't want war crimes committed by combatants. We don't want war crimes committed by people who have been deputized into territorial defense units. We don't want war crimes committed by anyone. And if war crimes are being committed, we want people to report them to try to stop them if they're in a position to do so safely, to report them in if they're in a position to do so safely. And this is the only way we can try to stop this. So if you know someone who has blown the whistle on war crimes being committed by their side or soldiers who they've seen do it, contact my law offices. We'll try to report this to the appropriate authorities, whether Ukrainian or Russian or LDPR. And we will also try to make sure that that person is kept safe. Thank you. Look forward to helping everyone and hoping that this conflict will end as quickly as possible with minimal loss of life, minimal suffering, and minimal loss of civilian infrastructure.